returning to the town of Knoxville, Tennessee, in which I was brought up from the age of 8, almost 9 years old, going on 9, when we arrived in 1947. And I was not born, I'm not a native of Knoxville in the sense of having been born there. However, I feel it is the birthplace of certain phases of my life, such as my adolescence and my once I had reached puberty, that the beginning of my erotic life, going out on dates with Knoxville girls, and also having some flings with older women who I got to know through my sister usually, one of whom was a singer, and had gotten a Grace Morse fellowship for the opera program at the University of Tennessee. My father started, and Ramona Elson, her name Perez from Chattanooga. Ramona was a beautiful young woman and very sexy. And I don't really want to talk on YouTube about things like that, so I will stop talking about anything of that sort. And I will talk about my oldest friend from the time I was 11 years old, Jerome David Madden, author of many, many books situated in Knoxville. And his most recent huge success was a book called London Bridge, which he published with the University of Tennessee Press, and they did a beautiful job. I read it. And I wonder that it hasn't won something like a National Book Award, because it was very, very inspired and well-managed narrative. I would have rather seen it, in fact, as to be a kind of book review from me on that book, that it had been done as a play, that I didn't like the narrative manner of it as much as I might have liked it if it were more like a dramatic poem with parts and you know, my friend Madden started out as a playwright, and I actually had a fellowship, a John Golden fellowship to Yale Drama School. Was a very good playwright for a long time, influenced by people like Tennessee Williams, whom he knew very well, and you know, he'd grown up in the shadow of, you might say, of Thomas Wolfe, who's the Homeward Angel, is set in Nashville, Tennessee, very close to where he lives at Black Mountain on Church Street. And it's very near where I went to summer camp, Camp Sequoia, which is near Weaverville.
You have to go to the supermarket. If you're done, just start a new topic. Make it a double video. Okay?
Mm-hmm. I'm now going to talk more about my dear friend, whom I call Jerry Madden, not David Madden, though that's his pen name. And my father, having been so poor, having worked his way through in the lumber yard and delivering baked goods for breakfast in Evanston, having worked his way through Northwestern, and been really plagued by poverty, humiliated by it, and made to feel that he could have done so many more things if he could have afforded to travel or to buy them. In other words, he was thwarted by poverty, or I think he had that sense. Now, Jerry grew up in what you might have called, in my time, the slums of Knoxville called Lonsdale. And ironically, one of our friends is married to is from Nashville. I mean, uh, from Putney, Maine. Torrin Kester is married to uh, his wife's name is Lonsdale. She comes from Nashville, and I mean, I doubt if she knows that is the name of the section of Knoxville, Tennessee, near Oak Ridge, uh, which is we always refer to as the slums of Knoxville. That it's called Lonsdale. And she's I understand, a rather beautiful woman, and they have two beautiful kids, a girl and a boy named Fritz. Uh, uh, Jerry and I once took a walk through his stamping grounds, and there was a place he'd grown up. We went by all his favorite haunts. He pointed out the house he had grown up in, and where his grandmother, we call Mama, lived, and his mother, whom I knew very well, a very sweet woman, very good mother to Jerry, um, and his father, Jimmy Madden, who had a problem with drink and worked as a fitter for Breezy Wind's hugely prosperous millionaire business making athletic uh, clothes for the University of Tennessee football team. Breezy Wind was quite a character and a very important and extremely uh, successful um, businessman in Knoxville, Tennessee, with his athletic Win athletic. I once because my best friend Charles Smith, whose grandmother owned the Knoxville Journal. This is Lot speech. Uh, I call him Chubby Smith. Chubby was a great football player and played for the University of Tennessee. I mentioned him in an earlier section. Um, once he went to Mr. Wynn out to the place they made their clothes and had their display section where you could go and look at all the items that they made for not only things like football pads and the beautiful tight, clinging, rather flamboyant um, football pants that that were made out of a kind of a nylon that looked like satin. I mean, they were just gorgeous, sort of a silver blue. Anyway, Chubby went and asked Mr. Wind if he could have a pair because he's going down to play football at Baylor Military Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. In fact, I drove with him and his father, so his father would have somebody driving back with him, and had a very nice time talking about a golf tournament that his father had won every hole, every shot, coming back from Chattanooga from Knoxville. There was another great military school down there, maybe even academically superior, called Macaulay. Uh, but anyway, uh, Chub Smith got his pair of pants, and it emboldened me to do the same and go out there, park my car, my Thunderbird, and a 57 Thunderbird convertible, go in and ask the secretary to see Mr. Wynn. And who's Breezy Wynn? That was his nickname he got at the University of Tennessee because he was a great fullback and quite fast. He came from Georgia and had a great football career there. And that sort of led to his prominence in business and to a certain extent his success. I mean, he became multimillionaire. I think he was worth about $11 million when I knew him. And I went in to his office. He was glad to see me, enthusiastic. He knew both my parents, because we'd often run into them out at church and country club. And all the Wynn family. His daughter was quite beautiful, and Dickie Wynn was a young man I knew, and quite a dazzling fellow, one of the rich boys in town, along with Chubby Smith. And I don't know if they ever talked to me about me that way as a rich boy, but so I would, Mr. Wynn called for Jerry's father to come and fit me and take measurements. So and then he told me how long it would take to make them, and when to come, give them a call and see if they were ready to come pick them up, which I did. And I wore them when I played fullback at Lawrenceville School my senior year. They were beautifully made. They were very tight and well fitted, and I also had a beautiful pair of football shoes made with this kind of very fine leather from Australia, and they were football cleats, but it was very, very fine black leather. Sort of, they were high shoes, not the ones without a support around the ankles that some of the running backs use. And I think I had a feeling that you could run faster with those lighter shoes that were more like running shoes, or with cleats though. I mean, these had rather long cleats. They were, if it was real muddy, they surely would help you, especially if somebody's to tackle. You come into the middle of the line, as I had to run many times doing the fullback wedge play. The line around the center or the quarterback would actually make a wedge shape. They would go to right and left at angles and make a wedge shape, and the fullback would be right behind them, and that line would really clear people out of the way, and sometimes you'd run into one of your own players, and sometimes I was almost tempted to climb up on their backs and jump over the other side, because it was like a log jam or something, this wedge-shaped log jam. But it's enough said about football and getting my beautiful free pair of which was a real courtesy and favor to my family, and the fact that we'd known the Wynns for a long time. And but a very important person in Jerry Madden's life, Breezy Wynn, because when his father was really, his drinking problem was really having the consequence of economic problems. He had to lose jobs because he'd report to work drunk and so on. I mean, it was a real nightmare for Jerry growing up. But finally he got on top of it and had this job that he kept for a long time, being the fitter at the Wynn Athletic Company. And Jerry had a lot to bear, and my father paid for his tuition, and would often just give him money if he was short of cash. I always thought Jerry should have cash in his pocket if he's going to be taking out girls and doing anything like that. So Daddy was very generous, and he's very grateful to me. Jerry is great. David Madden is extremely grateful to my father, and he was not my father's namesake. His uncle was named David Madden, and then he had there was another Madden who belonged to Cherokee Country Club called Slick Madden. I don't know what that was his nickname, Slick. And I don't know what his real Christian name was. Jerry, I I I've read many of his books. His I think his book of short stories was a story called The Singer. Is the best of the things he's written. He published a lot of short stories, and also, and The Singer is about the coal mining district where Hazard and Harlan, Kentucky are, and then there's a wonderful book he wrote about his brother. Um, a wonderful book also called, well, that's called Brothers in Confidence. And then The Bijou is in many ways my favorite of his novels. I've read so many of them, and I tried to get other publishers in France to be interested. I had a copy of Bijou, and but I couldn't get anybody to take it on or buy rights to it here. He was once acted as my agent, but I was quite frustrated with the way he handled things. He handled two books, an autobiography of myself, a kind of roman, a clef, they call it here in France, as a girl growing up in my household in Knoxville, 2824 Kingston Pike. And I was called Antonia Grayson, Tony Grayson. And I wrote about our place on the Tennessee River, which was like a chateau with a gorgeous view, and rock gardens going down to the riverbank and the garden below, rose garden below. And anyway, and then I also wrote a book. That book has a lot about Jerry in it, and that novel he is called Cassie, or for Cassandra, which is because of his wonderful novel called Cassandra Singing. I mean, that's really maybe the one I like the best of his novels. I did like it better than London Bridge. He's written, published University of Louisiana, State Louisiana Press published all his essays and a whole volume of poems. I mean, they're very generous about all his literary work, his stories, his critical essays, which are often really brilliant, especially on Faulkner and other people. Lots of book reviews that he's written over the years. I mean, he has a huge volume of work. I think he's published something like 50 books. And interesting that one of the writers who's written blurbs for his books and is very high in his writing is Stephen King. He's had other writers who have written very positively about him. He wrote a book about an American novelist named Wright Morris, and I think it's called The Field of Vision. And then he wrote a book called Tough Guy Novels, and then another book about people like Dashiell Hammett and the kind of noir, we call them noir detective novels. And then I think there's another book about, I don't know how much he's written about playwrights, but I mean, it's an extraordinary output. I mean, he has every right to be extremely proud of himself. He's emeritus professor of the having taught at LSU for years and years, and lived in Baton Rouge in a gorgeous house, probably the prettiest house in town, which had big spreads in the Baton Rouge Sunday paper, and made Robbie, his wife, who was sort of a labor activist, very proud. And their son Blake Madden, who's a photographer, and now I think teaching fine arts people on master's programs. I haven't seen Blake since he was a little boy or a baby. I mean, years and years. But I will try to get to Black Mountain and see all the family. Roberta, Robbie, Blake, his daughter, who I think has gone to Pomona College, and very brilliant, half Chinese American girl, and got into Harvard, turned it down, went to Pomona, which was the top small college in the country for a long time. I don't know what she's doing at the moment, but I think she's a brilliant student wherever she would go. Um, anyway, that's enough said about David Madden, who I hope won one of the big prizes. I mean, and he's published so many books, and probably win surely a MacArthur Genius Grant, and it would be wonderful if that happened because. Life has never been easy for him. He always had to work his way through. I mean, he always had a job, never lazy, hardworking, and always did everything he did at a very, very high quality work, whatever it was. It was excellence, always in his teaching and in his scholarly work, and he's one of the most voluminous readers I've ever known. I mean, he's sort of read everything there is to read. I mean, he once recently went to a Simenon, on a Simenon jag, and read everything George Simenon, who wrote about detectives, and Sergeant Margarian, I read something like 200 novels, almost the kind of output of a Balzac. But anyway, he read everything of Simenon, and trying to think of other people that he devours. He's a hugely well-read person and extremely knowledgeable, and I mean the kind of person that whose opinions one really seeks out because they're always going to be interesting and well-informed, and is maybe has been backed up by to fill in any of the real depth or and substance to the critical judgment that he's formed about whatever it is. A novelist, a poet, a historian. He was also the head of and basically started and ran for a long time the Civil War Center in Baton Rouge, which I think has now become a national Congress subsidized center that goes on and uses allocations from the Congress to continue. I mean, it's very, very significant contribution he made there of managing that and starting it and seeing it through with real follow-up. Something he's very proud of, the Civil War Center. And I'm sure there's some new development that's interesting. I mean, he's called all over the United States to talk about things that he's been involved in, and that's one of his pet projects, and brilliantly executed from beginning to end. So I mean, he's a person who's had huge influence on my life, and contributed greatly to my whole young years of intellectual development. When my father and mother would have to be away from our house, because my mother always went to my father's rehearsals for the Knoxville Symphony, Jerry Madden was hired as my babysitter, and he always made every time, every evening that he came to be present when my parents were absent. Uh, Interesting. We do these art projects. We go up even to Gay Street, and just walking around, looking around Knoxville. I mean, we're both kind of connoisseurs of Knoxville, low-life culture, and always talking about the city. This city, which was our city, this little town. I mean, my father denigrated it sometimes, but I mean, it was fascinating. It's the subject of his novels, that's Shirley Bijou, and other things that he's done, and figures and stories. We shared friends like David Minot, who came from Fountain City, and another friend, Brendan Liddell, who had been a Catholic priest and then finally abdicated that position and married. Decided he wanted a married life and discontinue his celibate life. He married one of my sister's best friend, uh, whose name was Charlotte, um, and I don't know if that was a successful marriage or not. I think that there's a kind of, I have a feeling, I remember that there was a rather, it was tinged with some tragedy. And there was another friend of my sister's um, named Rutter, Rutter. And we also had a great friend who was a mutual friend of Jerry's, also Walton Rawls from South Carolina, who went to Harvard, and was a wonderful friend. He became an important art publisher. His wife had been a painter who died, and Jerry knew him in Columbia, South Carolina, where he went down to some film festival and met this fabulous uh, young woman named Hope Savage, who was later the lover of Gregory Corso, and knew Allen Ginsberg and a lot of other beat poets very well. She was from Camden, South Carolina. Her father was the mayor of that city, and the family moved up when the children need to go to good schools for their education. And I'm actually a very, very good friend of her sister, Virginia Savage, who was a very close friend of some of our best friends in Cambridge, Julia and Nicholas Kilmer. But that's a long story about Hope. But I mean, that was one of the experiences that Jerry and I shared. And Hope came to Knoxville after Jerry had met her at this film festival. I think where the University of South Carolina is, Columbia, Columbia, South Carolina, or maybe it's Columbus, South Carolina. I think I'm thinking of Columbus, Ohio, but getting mixed up there. But she came up to Knoxville, and one of Jerry's best friend, Vera Hale and June Brown were present at Jerry's, and he took pictures. They were all sort of lounging as in some impressionist painting and Jerry and Robbie's double bed. Jerry took brilliant photographs of Hope. I mean, she was so beautiful, really. One of the most beautiful young women that I ever set eyes on, mainly seeing these photographs that he had done. And then she heard about me and she wrote me a letter at Lawrenceville and sent me a copy of Schiller's The Robbers. And I mean, my years of friendship with Jerry are full of stories and riches, and always wonderful encounters we had. He had a little fling with my sister one time, I remember. And we also had some other shared romances that we had in common, people we had our eyes on or had some relations with another, and had a lot of wonderful, funny talk about that. Uh, these more intimate relation events in our life, erotic side of our life, always figured right at the center of Jerry's, surely his fiction, his love for years and years of his girlfriend, Iva Lee, and also a very close relationship to Vera Hale, who later went out to San Francisco. Her late husband was named Dauber. He was the head sensei at the San Francisco Zen Center. I met Vera out there when I went to San Francisco and heard a lot about the Zen Center. Dauber was his name, and so and then Jerry was in North Beach in San Francisco, and when the Beats were there, friend of all of them, Kerouac, Ginsberg, Gregory Corso was one of them, the one that Hope Savage had been in love with, and also my ex-wife Anita, my son Davy's mother, knew Gregory Corso in Paris, and once he came to her room in her hotel, took off his clothes and offered himself and said, how do you like my boy's body? And she was not, she didn't tumble to that one. He went away unrequited. It was unrequited love. But he did at least show himself naked. He was a very successful poet of the beat, among the beats. And Allen Ginsberg and I, when I saw him when I was at the University of Connecticut and also at Rutgers University, when Richard Poirier was editor of Partisan Review at that time, brought him. He had also published the great essay by Susan Sontag on style and on the word trying to think, sorry. He brought Allen Ginsberg to Rutgers and he gave an evening I attended with my wife, Anita, who was getting a PhD there at the time. Susan Sontag wrote an essay in Partisan about style and also defined, it was a very difficult word to define camp, which was current at that time. I'm talking about the year 1972 maybe, or 1968, or mid-60s, when just about the time America got in the Vietnam War, 65. Richard Poirier brought Allen Ginsberg to Rutgers, and we had a terrific evening there. And then he came later to University of Connecticut, and I had to introduce him to the graduate school faculty. And then he went on to the auditorium before 10,000 students with his little squeeze box doing his Blake poems. That was his way of doing it. I mean, he was a tremendous success story. He was mesmerizing. I mean, you could hold an audience better than anybody I'd ever witnessed, and a lot of fun to talk to. Um, but we talked a lot about Hope Savage and Gregory Corso when he came that time. And the first thing he did after I finished my my introduction to the English faculty and graduate students before his big event at the university gym and theater. We were walking over to the faculty club to dinner. He said, "Was that your class?" I said, "No, that's just the graduate students and some of the professors who teach English here." And then as soon as we got to the faculty club, he pigeonholed he got the vice president of the university, and he brought all this stuff about their government contracts, UConn's government contracts, and was really asking very accusatory, probing questions, and the vice president said, "Well, just got us seated at the big main table for dinner," and then said, "I'll have to speak to the president of the university about it. I'll get right back to you, I promise." And he did. I mean, Ginsberg got results. I mean, he got people to listen to him. I mean, he had that kind of reputation. He was the most, after Howell, he was the most celebrated poet in America, I would say. Actually, I'm a fan of that, of Howell. It's a very powerful poem with huge momentum and impulse. It was a lot of fun and very memorable. And I've said enough about Jerry and that whole period in my life to last for a while. Thank you very much for your attention and your patience. Nicholas?